Baseball is my first love to this day. If I were 20 years old now and God said to me, you got 3 seconds, you could be Clark Gable or Stan Musial, who would I pick? Stan the man. I was on the Johnstown roster in the Brooklyn Dodger organization. They failed to protect me. And during the following year, early in the year, I found out I was drafted by the Yankees because Paul Critchell saw my name on the draft list, open draft. Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors, 6'6", left-handed first baseman. He said, I knew there could only be one of those. That's how I got to the Yankees. During 1946, 7, and 7, 8, I played in the Dodger organization in the summer and with the Boston Celtics in the winter. And people say, how could you do that? They overlapped. They didn't overlap then. The basketball season would be over near the end of February. You'd go to spring training. It wasn't in the major leagues, it was the minors. And I'd be ready at the end of September to go back and play basketball. I played one game with the Dodgers in 1949, and they sent me out to Montreal, where we had very good teams, by the way. And it later sold me to the Cubs, where I played a half a season. So I had we used to say, a cup of coffee in the majors. Now I go around to baseball card shows. I'm a legend. I've hit these home runs, which I never hit. In fact, one guy said to me, I was in Ebbets Field the day you hit that home run. And many have said this, man. I say, no, you got me mixed up. Now I say, oh, were you? Yeah, I was at bat one time for the Dodgers, one time, and I hit into a double play. Is that ignominious? You can't do the things I did and have a bad year. That was in L.A. And I'm going to tell you, I put myself down before. In L.A., I had 77 RBIs, 22 home runs in 70 games, and they sent me to the Cubs. What I used to do there, because we had an awful lot of Hollywood producers, actors, casting directors, and what have you, come to the games. You got to have the good year to do what I did. But I had been in Tijuana, saw my first bullfight. And when a guy, kills the bull, which I don't approve of that much, it's his home run, right? He doesn't run around the bases. He walks around the arena with his cape. They drop stockings on him, gourds of wine, kisses. I said, why? There's no rule when you hit a home run in baseball, you got to run. So the next time I hit one, boomed it out in right field. I turned around to the umpire and I said, you see the way I hit that? He said to me, what are you doing? I said, I'm talking to you about my hit. He said, get your butt around the bases. I said, I'll do it, but there's no rule I have to do it quickly. So I sauntered down to first base. And the first baseman says to me, what are you doing, Chuck? I said, the umpire just asked me the same darn thing. I said, just take it easy. I hit a home run, I'm rounding the bases. And I run like heck, slide into second. There's no play. I get up and cartwheel to third base. Stan Hack, who played with the Cubs, was my manager. You know what he said to me? I can't put the same thing. What are you doing? I said, I'm having a lot of fun, Stanley. I never stole home in my life. Watch this. I run like a devil, slide on my face, safe at home. I got a call 2 months later to come over to MGM and be in a movie. So it worked. So I went over there and I tested for a role in Pat Mike with Tracy and Hepburn. I got it. And in fact, the director said to me, he said, you've got a lot of improvement to make it. But he said, how did you do it? What do you know about acting that you did it well enough to be cast? And I said, well, I went a lot of Burt Lancaster pictures. I just imitate him. The show was a very simple show. It was dressed up in all the adventurous qualities of the West with the big old rifle and everything. But the heart of the show, the love of the show, was the relationship between the parent and the child. We did it as father and son. And to this day, it means something to people. This is one of the original guns of the rifleman. You see the ring, you see the screw, and you see the action both ways. This made my life kinda, but using it gently. This is actually an 1892 Winchester 44-40. We adapted it, we put this big ring on it so that I could get my hands through it and flip my rifle like the other cowboys flip their pistols. So there she is. I still got her and I still love her.
The first film I did with Hitchcock was The Birds. I hadn't done any, dramatic films. I had just done the commercials. So I was aware technically about all of it. It was just a difference in going into a character, another character, rather than holding up a product. Hitchcock always had the same crew working with him, and so we became very family-oriented and knew each other very well. And I think Hitchcock had those kinds of people working for him all the time because they eventually knew exactly what he wanted. He didn't have to explain as much as he would to a new crew or that sort of thing. Everybody knew what they wanted and what he wanted. And he was, of course, absolute director. It was his painting. I think I am the only actress who worked with Hitchcock and Chaplin both. And it was interesting because, you know, the macabre sort of films that Hitchcock did, he was sometimes very funny on the set. And he'd tell us funny stories and jokes just before we might go into a very serious scene. And Charlie, on the other hand, was, even though his films were very funny, he was extremely serious on the set. But the interesting thing about that was, and how sad that nobody did a documentary on him directing, because he acted out everyone's parts and then would say, okay, now you do it. Marlon Brando didn't like that. My daughter is Melanie Griffith, and Melanie has become, I think, one of the finest actresses in Hollywood. There's a natural ability in Melanie that is absolutely thrilling. She has such a vulnerable sensitivity and an incredible way of getting into a character. She's quite astounding. Working with the animals teaches you a great deal. It teaches you not only about the different characteristics of each species, but the personality traits that can be, subtly different in each animal. But it also teaches you how honest they are. And that's one of the most wonderful things. And the acceptance they have of you. They ask nothing of you. They just accept you as you are. We started the Shambhala Preserve after the movie Roar was finished and distributed all over the world. And by 1983, all of those monies were gone, and I formed the Roar Foundation and the Shambhala Preserve in order to keep the animals here. The Shambhala Preserve is about 130 acres, on which live 59 great cats, and 2 African elephants. And that includes African lion, Siberian tiger, Bengal tiger, leopard, cougar, and a tigon. The Shambhala Preserve is the most important extension of my life. My career is important, my family is important, and they all understand this. You know, my family's been wonderful about it.
Well, I've been lucky enough to grow up to mature in the last half of the 20th century. I'm a philosopher. I'm an activist philosopher. I've always, since I was a young boy, wanted to find out new discoveries that will help the human race and so forth. I first discovered the powers of psychedelic botanicals. That's mushrooms or LSD or even marijuana in 1960 when I was a Harvard professor studying consciousness and behavior change. I was totally surprised and staggered to discover that within the human brain there are all sorts of, I now think of the brain as a computer, there are all sorts of files and multimedia directories and all sorts of information terrains inside the brain that Western psychology had not prepared us for. You cannot become an individual all by yourself. The paradox here is that if you empower yourself, you become like a psychological Rambo. You think that you're the center of everything. And you're running around saying, hey, I understand God and man and law, but hey, I've forgotten my zip code. The motto from the 60s of turn on, tune, and drop out was actually given to me by a master of public opinion and communication, Marshall McLuhan. He was one of our guides, a counselor. I really respect him. McLuhan's predictions about the information age, about the computer global network, are just coming true. And it was McLuhan that said, well, what you need is a bouncy motto here, and he came out with a turn on, tune, and drop out. We tried very hard in the 60s to explain, by drop out, we meant the most basic American human goal. Drop out of lockstep, drop out of conformity, drop out of blind obedience. Drop out means to develop, try something new, but only a while. It doesn't mean drop out permanently. Drop out for an hour, drop out for a year, drop out for a week. I knew Cary Grant in the 60s. He was one of the people that taught me about the use of LSD. Cary Grant took LSD regularly under medical guidance. I will be remembered, I think, as a member of a large group of artists and thinkers and writers and innovators in the late 20th century that helped prepare us for the 21st century. But you know, I have no intention of dying. This bracelet here I have means that I'm a member of Alcor. Alcor is a group here in Southern California of young scientists, and I'm going to be cryonically frozen, hibernated. I'm not going to die. I'm going to deanimate if and when and how and with whom I want. We have formed small in-groups of other people. We're going to hibernate together. When the time comes that science can bring us back, either through nanotechnology, that's atom research, or through cloning, we will be brought back as a group. We don't want to come back as individuals or people in an assembly line factory popping back up again. We want to come back exactly when we want to. For example, we will never be reanimated during a Republican administration.
I played in dance band and played in small combos in high school and things like that. I really didn't have a musical career until I auditioned for a show called Shindig, which was on the ABC network, and I was just by chance had a chance to audition for it. They, I think after 20 minutes of meeting with them, they came out of the office and said, "How would you like to do 26 of our shows?" And I said, "Okay." I wasn't doing anything that summer. I was going to college studying to be a child psychologist. When I did Shindig, everybody did that show. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, anybody that was anybody was doing. In fact, so a lot of the people emerged from Shindig. There was Glenn Campbell, the Righteous Brothers, Billy Preston. When I did Shindig, there really wasn't much opportunity for me to go out and do concert touring and all that kind of thing. So I never considered myself a teenage idol. I was just kind of the house singer on this television show. Singing other people's hits. If they couldn't make it to the show, I'd sing, the song that the group that couldn't show up. It's Bobby Sherman doing the Rolling Stones' "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." Figure that out. It wasn't until Here Come the Brides that my record career really had a chance to take off. I never knew where home was. All we did was tour, and in fact, I was in so many different places so often that I had to sleep with a nightlight on. Most people thought I was just a big scaredy cat, but I really didn't know where I was in the middle of the night, so I needed a light to know where I was going. I think probably every day I was out there, I kept saying, I got to pinch myself, it's just unreal. And again, just that I was so lucky, and more importantly, that I was really lucky to have some really devoted fans that, that cared about, the things I did. So they became just as much of a responsibility to me as my own family. I think during Shindig, I had a lot of opportunities to see acts that would come and go. One hit, and then all of a sudden it would kind of stop, or maybe a couple of hits, and things would kind of cool off. So I was kind of aware that that a record career or a music career or whatever, as far as the business, it has its ups and downs, and it can get quiet real quick. So I was kind of sensitive to that. I've produced both in music and in features, television, also scoring and different kinds of, even involved in writing. And I think the challenge that being a producer has is much more, I think, difficult, but a lot more challenging than just playing a particular character. You basically sit down and you wait to be called on set. You do your part, and you go back and sit down and wait. With a producer, or even as a director, you've got the entire project to worry about. Everyone says, what do you enjoy most, singing or acting or whatever? And I say, whatever I'm not doing is what I enjoy the most. And I think now, since I haven't really been doing the acting as far as like a series or a movie for some time, I think that's really kind of what I'm setting the targets for. So we're looking for different kinds of projects. I'm an EMT with Los Angeles County, certified, and that's what we do. We're a group of volunteer emergency medical technicians that effectively take care of or respond to traffic accidents. We do communications as well as stabilization, triage. We call in the necessary authorities and all that, and do our best to save people in need.
The school year 48-49 was my first year at UCLA, and I continued there until I retired in 1975. My players at UCLA would tell you that they never heard me mention winning. I never mentioned winning, but each day I'm trying to get them to make the most of what they have to improve themselves, not let a day go by in which they don't make every effort to improve themselves, and at the same time not expecting perfection. My father on the farm tried to get across to me and my three brothers that you should never try to be better than someone else. That's something that's out of your control, but you should never cease to try to be the best that you can be. Amos Alonzo Stagg, whose philosophy I admired very much, once said he never had a player in all his years that he didn't love, but he had many he didn't like. Well, that's certainly true. Nor do you like them all the same. You must try to give each one the treatment they earn and deserve. Probably the team that probably made as much of the championship teams that made as much out of what they had as anyone was my first national championship team of 1964, when I had no player over 6'5", and they went through undefeated. Webster judges success by accumulation of material possessions or the attainment of a position of power or prestige. And I don't think those necessarily indicate success, although they might. They do not necessarily so. So I wanted to come up with my own, and that's when I came up with a definition, probably from what my father tried to get across to me and my brothers, and that is peace of mind, which can be attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best that you're capable of becoming. Reputation, for example, is what others perceive you to be. Character is what you really are. Now, which is most important? I can tell you where almost every former player that I had at UCLA is, and what he's doing, and how well he's doing, and so on. Yes, I keep a close relationship with all my past players, and I have a lot of coaches contact me, a lot of high school coaches, and some college coaches too, but a lot of high school coaches will come out and visit, just maybe to spend a day just talking basketball, or maybe talking life in general and different things. Because in teaching, it is life. It's working with others, and that's basketball. I have regrets that I didn't do better at the things I did. I've tried to say to live up to my pyramid, but I'm imperfect, you know. But you know when you fail, and when you didn't, and I've made mistakes that I wish I hadn't. I wish that I would have been. I wish I'd have done more for Nellie than just having Nellie do more for me. I liked sports, and Nellie would do everything with sports for me, but she liked dancing, and I didn't like dancing, and I wouldn't dance. I wish I'd have done more things for Nellie, of the things that she wanted. You see these things after it's too late. I'd rather be remembered as a person who was a good person, that was interested in others, and rather than someone whose teams won a number of national championships.
I signed on with the Ebony Fashion Fair, which is, at that point in time, a 90 cities tour, 79 cities in 90 days. But by the time we hit the third city, going out in front of that live audience and hearing that, again, that was, oh, I know what this is about, you know? And I loved it. And I wanted to extend that feeling. And obviously the next move was to become an actor. But I was very fortunate. Unlike a lot of kids who wind up in Hollywood with no background or what have you, just wanting to become a star, I was advised to go back to New York and learn my craft. And I'm forever grateful for Bill Cosby for giving me that bit of information and advice. The last thing I did with the Rev Company, I had one line in a 3-hour play. It was a musical. And all I had to say was, yeah. And one night I forgot that. Esther rolled to this day. Teases me about that because she give me a rib shot. Hey! A number of years, and I have had a love-hate relationship with the character. And that it's wonderful on one hand that that's a character I established, and wherever I go, all over the world. I mean, people, John Shaft. And when it's all said and done, it's wonderful to be known for something. But on the other hand, I've done lots of other roles, none of which have gained the success of that character. And having people come up to you and say, you know, when are you going to do another Shaft? Are you still doing Shaft? I mean, no, I have done. Oh yes, I know. We've seen those, but I mean, what about Shaft? Shaft. Well, after a while, it can grate. I have not been able to show the vulnerability once or twice, but people, when I go in, expect me to be crashing through a window with a gun in my hand and taking charge and totally in control. From my point of view, I think that when I look at Shaft, as opposed to a lot of the others, that he did not deal in drugs, did not deal in hustling women, although he had his share of women. There was a very strong right and wrong about where he was coming from. And it did not matter whether that person was white, black, blue, or green. If you were right, you were right. If you were wrong, you were very wrong. And you had to deal with the consequences of that. Of course, you're talking about a kid who grew up watching Westerns, and none of the heroes in that period of time mirrored my existence at all. You know, the cowboys and what have you, none of which were black. And it was one of the first black heroes that stood for something, that was totally in charge of his own life. The character I played in Roots, probably, for me, one of the most rewarding roles I've had, in that I hated the role because it made me dredge up things that I really didn't want to look at. To grovel on the ground for George Hamilton being my master, was singularly the hardest thing I've ever had to do on film. One of our most important gifts that we have are our children. And I don't think we take care of them properly or give them as much attention as we should. We can't give them too much. And if we are lucky enough to be blessed with a wonderful family, I think it is incumbent upon us to assist other families who are not so fortunate.
I started show business when I was 6 years old. My mother was an actress with such people as Johnny McBrown and Hoot Gibson and those kind of things. And her agent suggested that I might be able to get some work and took me out on interviews. And sure enough, I started getting some work. I think being a child actor is probably a big advantage if it's approached the right way. You're expected to perform and to deal with situations as an adult, and I think that kind of emphasis on maturity is a good thing. And a lot of people apparently recently have come a cropper from being kid actors, but I have nothing but good things to say about it. The period was the I Like Ike times, and everybody was rosy. Nobody admitted that there was a problem in the world, and I don't think that's very socially responsible, quite frankly. If you're going to be a show that purports to present an all-American family, I think you have an obligation to deal with real problems, and because, frankly, an awful lot of kids have come up to me through the years and said, "Boy, I was compared negatively to you. Why couldn't you be more like Bud?" And that's a horrible thing to have to live with. I mean, any kind of comparison is invidious, but to be compared to a fantasy is doubly so. Well, when the show ended, I wasn't really anxious to do more of that type of character, the all-American boy next door, and yet I really did look pretty much, I looked probably 17 and I was really 20 or 21, and so I really wasn't too anxious to get work in that same vein. And then about that time I got busted for grass, and so between the bust for grass and my not being all that anxious to work as a teenage person anyway, I just didn't get any work, and so I more or less retired from acting at that point. A few years later, I found speedway motorcycle racing, and motorcycles have always been a part of my life since I was 14. So I gravitated to that immediately, and went on the circuit. It was 5 nights a week for, well, I've been doing it for 20 years now. Speedway has given me my Rocky experience twice, as a matter of fact. I've had a main event win over Mike Bass and Bruce Penhall. I got to tell you who Mike Bass and Bruce Penhall are. Mike Bass was the 7 or 8 times national champion, current and was at the time, and Bruce Penhall became the 2-time world champion just a few years later. So I beat both of those guys in a scratch main event. So I've accomplished a great deal in the speedway world. For about 20 years now, I've worked on different inventions with this friend of mine. He kind of comes up with the problems, and then I try and come up with the solutions, and then we try and market them. And we've had limited success, but we've got about 4 or 5 patents now. Our latest venture is a teletrack system, which is a lost and found tag. It has an 800 number on it and a code number. So if you lose your keys in the parking lot of a mall, you can phone in and say, "I've lost my keys, and I'm at this number," and then when they're found, the person who finds them phones the 800 number, and we can put these two together. And so for anything, it's for keys or pets or whatever you want to get back. For a long time, I've wanted to be president of the United States. And I even wrote a screenplay to that effect, because a few years ago, 20 years ago or so, there was quite an awareness of Bud Anderson in the world, and I thought maybe there's some weird way that maybe everybody would vote for Bud Anderson, and so then I'd all of a sudden be president, I don't miss the notoriety or the quote star treatment, but I do miss the work. Like I say, I started when I was 6 being an actor, and I learned the craft well, I thought, and the fact that I wasn't able to act after I was 21 or 2, that did bother me, and I still would like to act.